I found my husband inside my sister at my own baby shower. And what I did next put one of them in prison and the other in a psychiatric facility. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning because the revenge only makes sense when you understand just how deep the betrayal went and how perfectly I orchestrated their complete destruction. My name is Rebecca Morrison, and 6 months ago I was living what everyone thought was a perfect life. I was 31 years old, 7 months pregnant with my first child, married to my college sweetheart, Daniel Morrison, and working as a corporate attorney at one of Boston's most prestigious firms. My younger sister, Claire, had just moved back to Boston after years in New York, and I was thrilled to have her close again. We'd always been close, or so I thought. She was my maid of honor at my wedding 5 years earlier. She was the first person I called when I got my positive pregnancy test. She was helping me plan the nursery and throwing me the baby shower that was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The shower was held at my house, a beautiful Victorian in Brookline that Daniel and I had bought 3 years earlier and painstakingly restored. It was a Sunday afternoon in early October, one of those perfect New England fall days with golden light filtering through the trees and the air, just crisp enough to remind you that winter was coming. I had about 40 guests, mostly women from work, college friends, family members, and neighbors. Claire had done an incredible job with the decorations. Everything in soft yellows and grays because we were keeping the baby's sex a surprise. There were elaborate flower arrangements, a dessert table that looked like something from Pinterest, and games that were actually fun rather than awkward. I was sitting in the place of honor, surrounded by gifts, feeling overwhelmingly grateful and loved. My mother was sitting next to me, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue because she got emotional and everything. Daniel's mother was on my other side, already planning her babysitting schedule. Claire was flitting around being the perfect hostess, making sure everyone had drinks and food, orchestrating the games, taking photos. She looked beautiful that day, I remember thinking. She was wearing a fitted green dress that made her red hair look even more vibrant, and she was laughing and charming everyone the way she always did. Claire had always been the beautiful one, the charismatic one, the one who could walk into a room and make everyone love her. I was the smart one, the responsible one, the one who worked hard and played by the rules. Around 3 in the afternoon, I realized I hadn't seen Daniel in a while. He'd been there earlier, dutifully manning the grill for the lunch portion of the shower, making small talk with my aunts, accepting congratulations from everyone. But in the past hour or so, he'd disappeared. I asked my mother if she'd seen him, and she said she thought he'd gone inside to take a work call. That wasn't unusual. Daniel was a financial analyst at a hedge fund, and he was always taking urgent calls and responding to emails. Even on weekends, I waited another 15 minutes, but he still didn't reappear. My bladder was screaming at me anyway. Pregnancy had turned me into someone who needed to pee every 20 minutes, so I excused myself and headed inside. The house was quiet, most of the party being in the backyard, and I waddled through the kitchen and down the hallway toward our bedroom. I was planning to use our bathroom because the powder room near the kitchen was probably occupied, and I wanted to check on Daniel while I was at it. I noticed Claire's purse on the kitchen counter as I passed through, which struck me as odd because I thought she was still outside. But I didn't think much of it. Maybe she'd come in to get something and gone back out. Our bedroom door was closed, which was also a bit unusual. We normally left it open. I reached for the handle and turned it quietly, not wanting to disturb Daniel if he was on an important call. The door swung open silently, and the scene before me didn't immediately make sense to my brain. It was like looking at one of those optical illusions where you see a vase and then suddenly it's 2 faces, and once you see the faces, you can't unsee them. At first, I saw 2 people on my bed, on the white duvet we'd picked out together at Pottery Barn, and my mind tried to make it innocent. Daniel was comforting someone who was upset. Daniel was helping someone who was sick. Daniel was giving someone medical attention, and then all at once, I saw it for what it was. My husband was on top of my sister. Both of them were partially undressed. His pants were around his ankles. Her green dress was hiked up around her waist. They were so absorbed in what they were doing that they hadn't heard me open the door. I could hear them. I could hear the sounds they were making, sounds that I had thought were reserved for our bedroom, our intimacy, our marriage. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 5 or 6 seconds. My hand was still on the doorknob, my pregnant belly pressed against the doorframe, and I watched my husband fuck my sister in the bed where our child had been conceived, while 40 of our closest friends and family members sat in our backyard, celebrating the baby we were expecting. The logical response would have been to scream, to throw something, to announce my presence and start a confrontation that would bring the whole party running. That's what anyone would expect. That's probably what I should have done, but I didn't do any of those things. Instead, something very cold and very clear settled over me like a sheet of ice forming on a lake. I felt my heart rate slow down rather than speed up. I felt my breathing become deep and controlled. And I felt something inside me that I had never felt before, something sharp and hard and absolutely focused. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was clarity. I looked at them for another few seconds, memorizing every detail. The way Claire's hand was tangled in Daniel's hair, the same way I used to touch him. The way his hand gripped her hip with a familiarity that told me this wasn't the first time. The way neither of them had even a shred of guilt or caution in their movements. The way they were completely comfortable with each other, like this was routine. Then I quietly pulled the door closed, so quietly that the latch barely clicked, and I walked back down the hallway. I went to the powder room near the kitchen, peed, washed my hands, checked my appearance in the mirror. My face was calm. My makeup was still perfect. I looked exactly like a happy pregnant woman at her baby shower should look. I walked back outside to my guests, sat down in my seat of honor, and resumed opening presents. My mother asked if I'd found Daniel, and I said yes. He was handling a work crisis and would be back out soon. Everyone accepted this without question because everyone knew Daniel was always handling work crises. 15 minutes later, Daniel emerged from the house looking slightly flushed and disheveled, and 5 minutes after that, Claire came out from a different door, looking perfectly composed except for a slight smudge in her lipstick that probably only I noticed. They didn't come out together. They didn't look at each other. They both rejoined the party as if nothing had happened, and the shower continued. I opened the rest of my gifts. I played the games Claire had planned. I ate cake and laughed at jokes and thanked everyone for coming. I posed for photos with Claire, with Daniel, with my mother-in-law. In every single one of those photos, I'm smiling. If you saw them, you'd think I was having the time of my life, but inside, behind that smile, I was doing calculations. I was making plans. I was thinking with a clarity and focus that I had never experienced before, not even when I was working on the most complex legal cases. Because in that moment, standing in my backyard surrounded by people who loved me, watching my husband and my sister pretend that they hadn't just betrayed me in the most intimate and devastating way possible, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to cry or scream or make a scene. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I wasn't going to let them control the narrative or paint me as the crazy, irrational, hormonal pregnant wife. I was going to destroy them. Both of them, completely and systematically. And I was going to do it so carefully and so thoroughly that by the time I was done, they would wish they had never been born, But first, I needed information. I needed to know how long this had been going on, how deep it went, whether anyone else knew, what they'd said about me, what their plans were. I needed evidence that would hold up in court, because I was a lawyer and I knew that feelings didn't matter, facts and documentation mattered. And I needed time to plan, to get everything in order, to make sure that when I struck, it would be devastating and irreversible. So I played the part of the happy, oblivious wife. I smiled through the rest of the baby shower. I hugged Claire goodbye and thanked her for throwing such a beautiful party. I kissed Daniel goodnight and told him I loved him. And I started planning their destruction. The first thing I did, that very night after Daniel had fallen asleep, was go through his phone. I'd never done this before in our entire relationship. I'd never felt the need to. I trusted him completely, or I thought I did. I knew his passcode because we'd always been open about that kind of thing. No secrets, nothing to hide. I sat in the nursery, in the rocking chair we'd bought for late night feedings, and I went through every message, every email, every photo. And what I found was so much worse than I had imagined. The affair had been going on for 8 months. 8 months. It had started in February, around the time Claire had moved back to Boston. The early messages were flirtatious but deniable, the kind of thing they could have explained away as sibling-in-law banter if anyone had noticed. But they escalated quickly. By March, they were meeting for coffee. By April, they were sleeping together. By May, they were meeting up twice a week, sometimes at hotels, sometimes at Claire's apartment. Sometimes, and this made my stomach turn, at our house when I was at work, they had pet names for each other. Daniel called Claire Wildflower, which made me want to vomit because it was such a cliche. Claire called Daniel my love and baby and other terms of endearment that should have been mine alone. They sent each other explicit photos and messages. They talked about me, about how I was too focused on work, too tired lately, too consumed with the pregnancy. Claire had written she's turning into such a mom. I bet she'll never be fun again, and Daniel had responded with a laughing emoji and good thing I have you to keep things exciting. They talked about the future. This wasn't just a fling or a moment of weakness. They had discussed what would happen after the baby was born. Daniel had written that he felt trapped, that he'd married me too young, that he'd always wondered what it would be like to be with someone more spontaneous and exciting. Claire had written that she'd always been attracted to him, even back when he was dating me in college, and that she used to fantasize about stealing him away. Daniel had responded that he wished he'd met her first. There were messages from the week of my baby shower. On the Tuesday before, Claire had written, "Can't believe I'm throwing a party to celebrate my sister's pregnancy with my boyfriend. LOL, this is insane." Daniel had written back, "It is pretty fucked up, but also kind of hot." Claire had responded, "Think we can sneak away during the shower?" And Daniel had written, "Definitely, should be too distracted to notice." They had planned it. They had specifically planned to have sex at my baby shower in my house, while I was surrounded by guests celebrating the child I was carrying. The child Daniel had supposedly wanted just as much as I did. The child we'd been trying for over a year to conceive. I sat in that rocking chair reading message after message, and I didn't cry. I just absorbed it all, screenshotting everything, emailing the screenshots to a private email address I created just for this purpose, building my case like the lawyer I was. By the time the sun came up, I had documented everything. I had proof of the affair, the timeline, the locations where they'd met, the specific instances when Daniel had lied to me about working late or having quiet dinners. I had proof that Claire had been in our house, in our bed, on multiple occasions when I'd been at the office. I also found financial records that troubled me. Daniel had been withdrawing cash regularly, amounts that didn't match up with any legitimate expenses I knew about. Some of it had probably gone to hotel rooms for their trysts, but the amounts were larger than that would explain. I made note of that for further investigation. When Daniel woke up that Monday morning, I was already dressed for work, looking perfectly normal. I made him coffee like I always did. I asked him about his day. I kissed him goodbye, and then I went to my office and started phase 2 of my plan. I called a divorce attorney, someone I knew professionally but had never worked with directly. Her name was Margaret Chatton, and she had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in divorce proceedings. I'd once seen her eviscerate a hedge fund manager in a deposition, and I wanted that same energy directed at Daniel. Margaret's office was in downtown Boston, in one of those old buildings that screamed old money and power. I met with her during my lunch break, and I laid out everything I had discovered. I showed her the screenshots, the timeline, the evidence of the affair. I told her about the financial irregularities I'd noticed, and I told her exactly what I wanted. I want full custody of my child, I said. I want the house. I want alimony. I want him to pay for what he did. And I want it all documented in a way that destroys his reputation. Margaret looked at me with something like appreciation. You're pregnant and your husband is cheating with your sister. The optics alone are devastating for him, but we need to be strategic about timing. If you file now, you're 7 months pregnant and highly sympathetic. If you wait until after the baby is born, you have more leverage because custody is already established. What do you want to prioritize? I thought about it. I want to wait until I have everything in order. I want to know exactly where all our assets are. I want to know if there's anything else he's hiding. I want to understand the full scope of his betrayal before I strike. Can we do discovery before filing? Margaret smiled. Not officially, but unofficially. We can do a lot of investigation before we file anything. I have people who can look into financial records, employment records, anything you need. Give me 2 months and I'll give you a complete picture of your husband's life, including anything he's trying to hide. Do it, I said. Spare no expense. I have my own money, my own accounts. He doesn't monitor what I spend, and I want to know everything. That was how I spent my last 2 months of pregnancy. Outwardly, I was the perfect wife and mother-to-be. I went to prenatal appointments with Daniel holding my hand. I let Claire come over to help set up the nursery. I posed for maternity photos and posted them on social media with captions about how blessed and grateful I was. I threw a small dinner party for Daniel's birthday and played the loving wife. I went to work every day and handled my cases with my usual competence, but secretly, I was building a case against both of them that would ruin their lives. Margaret's investigator discovered things that even I hadn't known. Daniel had a second credit card I'd never seen, one he'd opened in his name only shortly after the affair started. He'd charged thousands of dollars to it, mostly at hotels and restaurants, but also jewelry that he'd never given to me. One purchase in particular caught my attention. A $3,000 necklace from Tiffany. Bought in July, I'd never received it. Claire, however, had posted an Instagram photo in August wearing a necklace that looked suspiciously similar, with a caption about treating myself. The investigator also discovered that Daniel had started looking at apartments. Not family apartments. Studio apartments in trendy neighborhoods, the kind of place a single guy would live. He'd filled out applications. He'd been planning to leave me, probably after the baby was born, probably to be with Claire. Claire, for her part, had her own secrets. The investigator looked into her background and found that she'd been fired from her job in New York, not laid off as she'd told the family. She'd been having an affair with her married boss, and when his wife found out, she'd made enough noise that the company had quietly let Claire go to avoid a scandal. This was a pattern for Claire, apparently. The investigator found evidence of at least 2 other affairs with attached men, one in college and one right after. My sister was a serial homewrecker, and I'd never known. I also had the investigator look into Claire's finances, and that's when things got really interesting. Claire was broke. She'd been living beyond her means in New York, and she'd moved back to Boston because she couldn't afford her lifestyle anymore. She had credit card debt in the tens of thousands. She was 3 months behind on her car payment. She'd borrowed money from our parents and never paid it back. And then I found the messages between Claire and Daniel about money. Daniel had been giving her cash, helping her with rent, buying her things. My husband had been financially supporting my sister's lifestyle with money from our joint accounts. Money that I had helped earn. Money that was supposed to be going toward our future, our child, our life together. That's when the anger finally hit me. Not when I caught them in bed together. Not when I read their messages about me. But when I realized that Daniel had been stealing from our family to support his affair with my sister. That he had been using my money to buy gifts for the woman who was betraying me. I remember sitting in my office, 8 months pregnant, looking at bank records, and feeling a rage so pure and so cold that it scared me. I wanted to destroy them. I wanted them to suffer the way they had made me suffer. I wanted them to lose everything the way they had stolen everything from me. But I was smart enough to know that acting on rage would be a mistake. So I channeled that anger into planning. I worked with Margaret to structure the divorce in a way that would maximize damage. We decided to file the day after I gave birth, when I would be at my most sympathetic and Daniel would look like a monster for abandoning his newborn child. We prepared all the paperwork in advance, ready to serve him at the hospital if necessary. I also started preparing what I called the social destruction phase of my plan. I created a detailed document outlining the entire affair with screenshots of messages, photos, dates, locations, and financial records. I prepared copies for Daniel's family, Claire's employer, my parents, and key people in our social circle. I wasn't going to just divorce Daniel quietly. I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what he and Claire had done. But the piece de resistance, the thing I was most proud of planning, involved Claire's career. She'd managed to land a job at a boutique marketing firm in Boston, one that prided itself on family values and ethical business practices. I did some research and discovered that the firm had a strict morality clause in their employment contracts, and that several employees had been terminated in the past for ethical violations, including one woman who'd been fired for having an affair with a client's husband. I drafted an anonymous complaint to Claire's HR department detailing her affair with a married man, her history of similar affairs, and her pattern of ethical violations. I included enough specific details that they would be able to verify everything I said, but not so many that they could trace it back to me. I planned to send it the same day I served Daniel with divorce papers. I gave birth to my daughter on December 3rd, and I named her Emma Grace. She was perfect. 7 pounds and 4 ounces with dark hair and Daniel's blue eyes. The labor was long and difficult, 22 hours that left me exhausted and in pain. And Daniel was there the whole time, holding my hand, whispering encouragement, crying when Emma was born, for a moment, a brief moment when they placed Emma in my arms and Daniel leaned over to kiss my forehead. I wondered if I was making a mistake. He looked so happy, so odd, so genuinely in love with our daughter. Maybe the affair was over. Maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe we could work through this. And then my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it while Daniel was holding Emma. It was from Claire. Congratulations. Can't wait to meet my niece. Tell Daniel I'm thinking of him. Tell Daniel I'm thinking of him. At the moment his wife had just given birth to his daughter, My sister was texting me to send a coded message to her lover. The affair wasn't over. They were still together, still messaging, still betraying me even now. Any doubt I'd had evaporated in that instant. I looked at Daniel holding our daughter, and all I felt was cold, clear determination. He'd made his choice. Now he'd live with the consequences. I waited 2 days until we were back home from the hospital. Daniel took a week off work to help with the baby, playing the devoted father, posting photos on social media of him holding Emma, changing diapers, doing all the things new fathers do. Claire came by to visit, bringing an elaborate flower arrangement and an expensive baby gift. Cooing over Emma and hugging me and telling me I was glowing. I smiled and thanked her and let her hold my daughter, all while knowing that in 48 hours, her entire world was going to implode. On Thursday morning, December 7th, I put my plan into motion. Daniel had gone back to work that day, his week of paternity leave over. Emma was napping. I was supposedly home alone recovering from childbirth. Instead, I got dressed, put Emma in her car seat, and drove to Margaret Chen's office. We'd prepared everything in advance, and now it was just a matter of execution. Margaret had hired a process server who would deliver the divorce papers to Daniel at his office at exactly 2 in the afternoon, in front of his colleagues, maximum humiliation. At the same time, I sent the anonymous complaint to Claire's HR department. I sent my detailed document about the affair to my parents, to Daniel's parents, and to 20 carefully selected people in our social circle, people I knew would spread the word quickly and effectively. I posted a statement on social media, brief and devastating. I'm heartbroken to share that I filed for divorce from Daniel. I discovered he's been having an affair with my sister Claire for the past 9 months, including throughout my pregnancy. I'm focusing on my daughter now and ask for privacy during this difficult time. I included one of the screenshots of their messages, carefully chosen for maximum impact. It was a message from Daniel to Claire from the week before Emma was born. Can't wait to meet the baby, but even more excited for us to finally be together without hiding. Just a few more weeks and I can start the divorce process. The post went nuclear within minutes. Friends started commenting with shock and support. Family members started calling. And then, at 2 in the afternoon exactly, Daniel was served with divorce papers at his office. I know this because I had a friend who worked in his building, and she texted me a play-by-play. Daniel had been in a meeting with clients when the process server walked in and asked for him by name. In front of everyone, he was handed the papers. His face went white, she said. He tried to excuse himself, but the damage was done. Everyone in that office now knew that Daniel Morrison's wife had just filed for divorce. 20 minutes later, my phone started ringing. It was Daniel. I didn't answer. He called again and again. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, he left a message, his voice shaking. "Rebecca, what the fuck? What are you doing? We need to talk about this. This is insane. Please call me back." While he was leaving that message, Claire was getting called into her boss's office. I know this because I'd made sure to time everything perfectly. Her HR department had received my complaint that morning, spent a few hours verifying the details, and called her in for a meeting at 2:30. By 3 o'clock, she'd been terminated for violating the company's ethics policy. Claire called me at 3:15, sobbing hysterically. I answered this call because I wanted to hear her panic. "Rebecca, I just got fired. Someone sent my company information about me and Daniel." "Did you do this?" "Please tell me you didn't do this." I kept my voice calm and cold. "Did I tell your employer that you're a homewrecker who's been fucking my husband for 9 months?" "No, Claire, I didn't do that." Someone else must have noticed and felt compelled to share that information. Probably the same person who told our entire family what you've been doing. Or maybe it was one of the people at my baby shower who saw you sneaking into my bedroom. Hard to keep secrets when you're that obvious about it. Rebecca, please, I can explain. No, I said, cutting her off. You can't explain. There's no explanation that makes this okay. You slept with my husband. You did it in my house, in my bed, at my baby shower while I was 7 months pregnant. You're a terrible person, Claire, and you deserve everything that's happening to you right now. Don't call me again. Don't come to my house. Don't contact my daughter. You're dead to me. I hung up while she was still crying. And then I blocked her number by that evening. The fallout was complete. My parents called, devastated and furious at Claire. Daniel's parents called, apologizing profusely and saying they'd support me and Emma however we needed. Friends were flooding my phone with supportive messages. The social media post had been shared hundreds of times. Daniel and Claire's betrayal was now public knowledge, and the court of public opinion had rendered its verdict. They were monsters. And I was the sympathetic victim. Daniel came home around 7 that evening. I'd been expecting him, and I'd prepared for this confrontation carefully. I had my phone set to record audio in my pocket. I wanted documentation of everything that was said. He walked in looking destroyed, his tie loose, his hair disheveled, his eyes red. Rebecca, we need to talk. No, I said calmly. We don't. Everything you need to know is in the divorce papers. Everything I needed to know about you and Claire, I've known for 3 months. There's nothing left to talk about. His face went even whiter. You've known for 3 months? Since when? Since October 6th, I said. Since your baby shower, when I walked into our bedroom and found you fucking my sister. I've known everything since then. I've read every message, seen every photo, tracked every lie you told me. I know about the credit card, the jewelry you bought her, the apartments you were looking at. I know you were planning to leave me. I know exactly who you are, Daniel, and I'm done. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Oh my God. You've known this whole time? During the pregnancy, the birth, everything? Everything, I confirmed. I smiled in the delivery room while you held my hand, and the whole time I was planning this. I let you think you were getting away with it, and I used that time to build an airtight case against you. You're going to lose everything, Daniel. The house, custody of Emma, your reputation, possibly your job when your company realizes you were misusing expense accounts to fund your affair, and taking everything, and you deserve it. Rebecca, please, I know I fucked up, but we can work through this. For Emma's sake. I love you. I love our daughter. I made a terrible mistake, but it's over with Claire. I swear, it's not over, I said. You texted her 2 days ago? Tell Daniel I'm thinking of him, remember? She sent that through me right after I gave birth to your daughter. You were still sneaking around with her even then. So don't tell me it's over. Don't tell me you love me. You don't betray people you love the way you betrayed me. Daniel started crying, actual tears streaming down his face. I don't know what happened to me. I got caught up in something and I couldn't stop. Claire made me feel exciting and young again, and with you it had become so routine, so domestic, and I just wanted, I don't care what you wanted, I interrupted. You made a choice. You made dozens of choices every time you met her, every time you lied to me, every time you used our money to buy her things. You chose this. Now live with it. What about Emma? He asked desperately. You can't keep me from my daughter? I'm not keeping you from her, I said. You'll have visitation rights, supervised until she's older. You can see her every other weekend, pay your child support, and be the part-time father you clearly wanted to be anyway based on those apartment searches. But you're not living here. You're not part of this family anymore. I want you out of this house tonight. This is my house too, he said, a flash of anger breaking through the tears. You can't just kick me out. Actually, I can, I said. Check the divorce papers. I'm claiming the house as part of the settlement, and my lawyer already got a judge to issue a temporary order giving me exclusive occupancy. You have until midnight to pack your things and leave, or I call the police. Your choice. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me, and maybe he didn't. The Rebecca he'd married was softer, more trusting, more forgiving. That Rebecca had died the moment I found him with Claire. This Rebecca was made of something harder and colder, something that couldn't be manipulated or sweet-talked or bargained with. Daniel packed his things in angry silence, throwing clothes and toiletries into suitcases while I sat in the nursery with Emma. Around 11, he came to the door of the nursery. Can I at least say goodbye to her? I considered refusing just to hurt him, that Emma was innocent in all this. You have 5 minutes. He picked up Emma, who was sleeping peacefully, and held her for a few moments. He was crying again, whispering things I couldn't hear. Then he handed her back to me and left without another word. I heard the front door close, heard his car start up and drive away. And then I was alone with my daughter in the house that was now just ours. I should have felt triumphant. I'd executed my plan perfectly. I'd destroyed both of them publicly and legally. I'd protected myself and my daughter and emerged as the sympathetic party in the dissolution of my marriage. But instead, sitting there in the rocking chair holding Emma, I felt empty, hollow. I'd won, but winning felt nothing like I expected. I thought revenge would be satisfying, cathartic, healing. Instead, it just felt exhausting. Emma stirred in my arms, making the little sounds babies make. And I looked down at her perfect face and realized that this wasn't over. Destroying Daniel and Claire was just the first phase. Now I had to actually rebuild my life, raise my daughter alone, and figure out who I was as a person after everything I'd been through. The divorce proceedings were brutal, as I'd intended them to be. Margaret went after Daniel with everything she had, and with the evidence I compiled, he had no defense. His lawyer tried to argue for joint custody, but the affair during my pregnancy, the financial improprieties, and the fact that he'd been planning to leave all worked against him. The judge was a woman in her 60s with no patience for Daniel's excuses, and she awarded me primary custody, the house, and substantial child support and alimony. The financial investigation also uncovered something that neither Margaret nor I had expected. Daniel had been embezzling from his firm. Not huge amounts, but enough that when his company launched an internal audit based on the divorce proceedings, they found discrepancies. Apparently, Daniel had been cooking his expense reports for years, claiming business expenses for personal purchases, redirecting client funds through complicated transactions that benefited him. It wasn't enough to make him rich, but it was enough to get him fired and potentially prosecuted. When I found out about the embezzlement, I had a moment of genuine shock. I'd known Daniel was a cheater and a liar, but I hadn't realized he was also a criminal. Margaret asked if I wanted to report him to the authorities, and I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted to see him in prison, but I also had to think about Emma. Having a father in prison would affect her, would become part of her story. In the end, I let his company handle it. They fired him and threatened criminal charges, but agreed not to prosecute if he paid back what he'd stolen and signed away his stock options. It still destroyed his career in finance now. Reputable firm would touch him after word got out about why he'd been terminated, but it kept him out of prison. Claire's destruction was more complete because she had less to lose to begin with. After being fired from her job, she couldn't find another one in Boston. The story of her affair had spread through professional networks, and no one wanted to hire the woman who'd slept with her pregnant sister's husband. She tried to move back to New York, but her reputation had followed her there too. She reached out to our parents for help, financial and otherwise, but my mother had taken my side completely. In fact, my mother had said something to Claire that I later heard through a family member. I raised you better than this. I don't know who you've become, but I don't recognize you anymore. Rebecca is my daughter and Emma is my granddaughter. And if I have to choose between you and them, I choose them every time. My father, who had always been Claire's ally because she was his baby girl, struggled more with the decision. But eventually, even he couldn't justify what she'd done. He told her he loved her, but he couldn't support her choices, and that she'd have to rebuild her life on her own. Claire spiraled. I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to a cheaper apartment in a bad neighborhood, that she was working as a bartender to make ends meet, that she'd gained weight and stopped taking care of herself. Part of me felt guilty about this. She was my sister, after all. We'd grown up together, shared a childhood, been close for 26 years before this happened, but then I'd remember the messages I'd read. She's turning into such a mom, I bet she'll never be fun again. The way they'd planned to have sex at my baby shower. The necklace Daniel had bought her with our money. And the guilt would evaporate, replaced by that same cold anger that had sustained me through the divorce. Claire tried to reach out several times over the first few months. She sent letters that I returned unopened. She sent emails that I deleted without reading. She even showed up at my house once, 3 months after everything had blown up, and I called the police to have her removed for trespassing. I got a restraining order after that, which she violated twice by trying to contact me through other people. The second violation landed her in jail for a weekend, and after that, she finally stopped trying. Daniel was more persistent. He wanted to be part of Emma's life, and legally he had that right. We'd agreed to supervised visitation every other weekend. Supervised because I didn't trust him alone with Heron because his life had become unstable after losing his job. He'd moved into a small apartment in a less desirable part of town, was working as a financial consultant for a small firm that didn't do background checks, and was paying child support that ate up most of his income. The first few visitation sessions were tense. Daniel would arrive at the agreed-upon location, usually a family visitation center, and spend 2 hours with Emma while a social worker watched. He'd hold her, play with her, try to be a father to a baby who didn't know him because I'd effectively cut him out of her life. I'd watch through the one-way glass sometimes, feeling nothing but contempt. This was the man I'd loved enough to marry, to build a life with, to have a child with. Now he was just a stranger who happened to share DNA with my daughter. One day, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Daniel asked if we could talk privately after a visitation session. I agreed, curious what he could possibly have to say that would matter to me. We sat in my car in the parking lot of the visitation center, Emma sleeping peacefully in her car seat in the back. Daniel looked terrible. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes looked like he'd slept in them. "I know you hate me," he started, "and you have every right to." What I did was unforgivable. I destroyed our marriage, our family, everything we built together. I destroyed my career, my reputation, my relationship with my parents. I know I did this to myself. I waited, not giving him anything. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you the way I did. I know that sounds stupid, but it's true. I got caught up in something that felt exciting and dangerous, and I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about you, about Emma, about everything I was risking. I was selfish and stupid, and I hate myself for it. Is there a point to this? I asked coldly. The point is that I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. I know you'll never forgive me, but I needed to say it, and I needed to tell you that I'm getting help. I'm in therapy. I'm working on understanding why I did what I did. And I'm trying to become the kind of father Emma deserves. I looked at him for a long moment. He seemed sincere, genuinely remorseful and broken. Part of me, a very small part, felt something like pity. He'd lost everything just as I'd intended. His life was in ruins because of choices he'd made, because of my systematic destruction of everything he'd valued. I don't forgive you, I said finally. I will never forgive you. What you did wasn't just cheating. It was calculated and cruel, and it went on for months. You used our money to support your affair. You planned to leave me. You had sex with my sister at my baby shower while I was 7 months pregnant with your child. Those aren't mistakes, Daniel. Those are choices that reveal who you really are. I know, he said quietly. I know I can't undo any of it. The only reason I'm letting you see Emma at all is because she deserves to know her father, even if her father is a piece of shit. But don't mistake my tolerance for forgiveness. I'm doing this for her, not for you. And if you ever do anything to hurt her the way you hurt me, I will make the last 6 months look like a mercy. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I won't. I promise. She's the only good thing I have left. I started the car, ending the conversation. Your next visitation is in 2 weeks. Don't be late. As I drove away, I felt that same emptiness I'd felt the night he moved out. I'd wanted to see him broken, and now he was broken. I'd wanted him to suffer, and he was suffering. But it didn't feel the way I'd expected. It didn't feel like victory. It just felt sad and pointless and exhausting. Emma was the only thing that made sense anymore. Watching her grow, seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, that was real and pure and untainted by everything that had happened. She was 6 months old now, rolling over and starting to sit up, making babbling sounds that seemed almost like words. She had no idea that her family had imploded before she was born, that her mother had spent months plotting revenge while carrying her, that her father and aunt had betrayed everyone who loved them. I'd taken a leave of absence from work after Emma was born, planning to go back after 3 months. But when the time came, I realized I didn't want to. I was a good lawyer, but I'd never loved it the way I was supposed to. I'd become a lawyer because it was prestigious and lucrative and what smart people did. But now, having lost everything else, I realized I didn't want to spend my life in conference rooms and courtrooms. I wanted to be present for Emma, to watch her grow, to not miss the moments that mattered. So I quit. I negotiated a consulting arrangement where I'd handle specific cases on a contract basis, working from home, setting my own hours. Between that income, the alimony and child support from Daniel, and the money I'd put away before everything happened, I was financially secure enough to make this choice. My life became smaller and quieter. I stopped going to social events. I stopped posting on social media. I lost touch with most of my friends, not because they abandoned me, but because I didn't have the energy to maintain those relationships. I became a mother, just a mother, and I tried to be okay with that, but the anger was still there, simmering under the surface. Every time I saw Daniel at a visitation exchange, every time I had to interact with him for Emma's sake, I felt it. Every time I thought about Claire, wondered where she was and what she was doing, I felt it. I'd destroyed them both, but it hadn't destroyed the anger. It had just redirected it inward, turning into something darker and more corrosive. I started having nightmares about the baby shower, about opening that bedroom door, about seeing them together. In the dreams, I'd react differently. Sometimes I'd scream and attack them. Sometimes I'd join them, which was deeply disturbing. Sometimes I'd just stand there watching for hours while they never noticed me. I'd wake up sweating and shaking, and I'd have to check on Emma to remind myself that she was real, that my life was real, that I wasn't still trapped in that moment at my therapist, because yes, I was in therapy, because you don't go through what I went through without needing professional help, said I had PTSD. She said that what I'd experienced was a profound betrayal trauma, compounded by the fact that I'd had to suppress my reaction for months while building my case. She said the revenge I'd taken, while justified in my mind, had prevented me from actually processing the grief and anger in a healthy way. You spent all your energy on destruction, she told me during one session. But destruction doesn't heal trauma. It just delays the emotional work you need to do. I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to hear that I'd done the right thing, that Daniel and Claire deserved everything I'd done to them, that my revenge was justified and good. But Dale Williams, my therapist, didn't deal in those kinds of validations. She dealt in uncomfortable truths. You did what you felt you needed to do, she said, and I'm not here to judge that. But now you're left with all the feelings you didn't process while you were planning your revenge. The grief, the betrayal, the loss, it's all still there. You haven't actually dealt with it. You've just buried it under anger and action. She was right, of course. As Emma approached her first birthday, I realized I was still trapped in the same emotional space I'd been in the day of the baby shower. I'd moved forward in practical ways: divorce, new living situation, new career arrangement, but emotionally, I was still standing in that doorway, watching my life fall apart. The first birthday party was small, just me, my parents, and a few close friends who'd stuck by me. I deliberately didn't invite Daniel, even though it was his daughter's birthday. I told myself it was because he didn't deserve to be there. But really, it was because I couldn't stand the thought of being in the same room with him on a day that should be happy. Daniel sent a gift, a stuffed elephant that Emma loved, and a card that said, "Happy birthday to my beautiful girl. Daddy loves you more than anything." I almost threw both away, but Emma had already grabbed the elephant and was hugging it, and I didn't have the heart to take it from her. My mother noticed me staring at the card with barely concealed fury. "You need to let some of this anger go, Rebecca. Not for his sake, but for yours and Emma's. He doesn't deserve forgiveness," I said. "I'm not talking about forgiveness," my mother replied. "I'm talking about letting go. They're not the same thing. You can acknowledge that what he did was terrible and still release the anger that's eating you alive. Look at yourself, sweetheart. You've lost weight, you barely sleep. You don't smile anymore except when you're with Emma. This revenge you took, it didn't make you happy. It just made you harder." I wanted to argue with her, but I couldn't. She was right. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, someone brittle and cold, someone who turned pain into power but had lost something essential in the process. That night, after everyone had gone home and Emma was asleep, I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do since the day of the baby shower. I cried. Not angry tears, not tears of frustration, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. I cried for the marriage I'd lost, for the sister I'd lost, for the innocence I'd lost. I cried for Emma, who would grow up in a broken home because of choices other people had made. I cried for myself, for the Rebecca I used to be, who believed in happily ever after and trusted the people she loved. I cried until I had nothing left. And then I just sat in the quiet of my house, feeling emptied out and exhausted, but somehow lighter. The next day, I called Dr. Williams and told her I was ready to do the real work. Not the surface stuff we'd been doing, but the deep, difficult work of actually processing trauma and rebuilding myself into someone who could be more than just angry. It took months. Therapy sessions where I had to relive that moment in the bedroom, where I had to examine my own role in the marriage's deterioration, where I had to separate what Daniel and Claire had done from my own worth as a person. It was harder than planning revenge had been, Harder than the divorce, harder than any of it, but slowly, I started to feel different. The nightmares became less frequent. The anger became less consuming. I started to see Daniel not as a monster, but as a flawed human who'd made terrible choices. I started to see Claire the same way. That didn't mean I forgave them. I still don't, even now, but it meant I could think about them without feeling like I was being poisoned from the inside. I also started to see myself differently. I'd thought of myself as a victim for so long, someone who'd been wronged and betrayed. But Dr. Williams helped me see that I was also a survivor, someone who'd been knocked down and had found a way to stand back up. The revenge I'd taken, while perhaps not psychologically healthy, had been a form of agency, of refusing to be passive in the face of betrayal. You're not a victim, Dr. Williams told me. Victims are helpless. You were hurt, but you weren't helpless. You took control of the situation in the only way you knew how. Now you're learning other ways to take control of your healing, your life, your future. Emma's second birthday came and went, and this time I invited Daniel. It was supervised. He could only stay for an hour, but it felt like progress. He brought her a tricycle, and she squealed with delight, and I managed to say thank you without it feeling like poison in my mouth. After the party, Daniel asked if we could talk again. I agreed, and we sat in my backyard while Emma napped inside, the baby monitor between us. You seem different, he observed. Better, maybe. I'm working on it, I said. Therapy, mostly. Trying to process everything in healthier ways. He nodded. I'm doing the same. Therapy, support groups, all of it. I think I'm finally starting to understand why I did what I did. Not that understanding makes it okay, but at least I know where it came from. And where did it come from? I asked, genuinely curious. Daniel was quiet for a long time. I think I was terrified of becoming boring, of becoming my father, who worked his whole life at a job he hated and never did anything exciting. When Claire showed interest in me, it made me feel young again, like I still had options, like my life wasn't already set in stone. I know that's a pathetic excuse. I know I had everything you, our marriage, Emma, on the way, and I threw it away because I was scared of being ordinary. We were ordinary, I said. That's what marriage is. It's ordinary and comfortable and sometimes boring. That's not a bad thing. I know that now, he said. But at the time, I couldn't see it. Claire represented excitement and danger and all the things I thought I was missing. I didn't realize I was destroying something real and valuable to chase something that was ultimately empty. What happened with you and Claire? I asked. After everything imploded, did you stay together? Daniel laughed bitterly. For about a week. Once the affair went from exciting secret to public scandal, once we both lost everything, there was nothing left between us. We didn't actually like each other. We just liked the thrill of sneaking around. When that was gone, we had nothing to talk about. She blamed me for ruining her life. I blamed her for encouraging me to destroy my marriage. It ended badly. Good, I said, and meant it. At least they hadn't gotten their happy ending. Have you heard from her? Daniel asked carefully. No, the restraining order is still in effect. I don't know where she is or what she's doing, and I don't want to know. She's in Florida, Daniel offered. Or she was 6 months ago, last time I heard. Working at a resort, I think. She changed her name, or at least started going by her middle name, trying to escape her reputation. I processed that information. Claire had run away, started over somewhere new, tried to become someone else. Part of me felt vindicated. She'd lost everything and had to flee. But another part of me just felt sad. She was my sister. We'd shared a childhood, shared parents, shared DNA, and now she was a stranger in Florida, and I was a single mother in Boston. and there was no path back to what we'd been. I don't wish her well, I said finally, but I don't wish her harm either. I just wish she didn't exist in my universe anymore. Daniel nodded. I understand that. For what it's worth, I think she has a lot of regrets. Last time we talked, she said she destroyed the most important relationship in her life, the one with you. She did, I said flatly, and I destroyed her career and her reputation in return. We're even in the most fucked up way possible. Now we're just two people who used to be family and aren't anymore. We sat in silence for a while, both processing the wreckage of relationships that couldn't be rebuilt. Eventually, Emma woke up and started crying, and I went inside to get her. Ending the conversation, over the next year, something shifted in my relationship with Daniel. We weren't friends, we'd never be friends, but we became effective co-parents. He was consistent with his visitations, paid his support on time, and genuinely tried to be a good father within the limited role I'd allowed him. I started to relax the restrictions bit by bit. First, unsupervised visits, then overnight visits when Emma was older. Eventually, a more normal custody arrangement, where he had her every other weekend and one night a week. It wasn't because I'd forgiven him. I hadn't, but I'd done enough therapy to understand that my anger at Daniel shouldn't dictate Emma's relationship with her father. She deserved to know him, to form her own opinion of him as she grew older, to have both parents in her life, even if those parents weren't together. Dr. Williams called this radical acceptance, accepting the reality of the situation without necessarily agreeing with or forgiving it. I'd never have my intact family back. I'd never have the marriage I thought I had. I'd never have my sister back. Those things were gone, destroyed by other people's choices and my own response to them. But I could accept that reality and build something new within it. Emma turned 3, and she started asking questions about why mommy and daddy didn't live together. I'd prepared for this with Dr. Williams, had practiced age-appropriate explanations. Mommy and daddy love you very much, but we don't live together anymore because grown-ups sometimes make that choice. It doesn't change how much we love you. She accepted it easily, the way children do, and moved on to asking if she could have a puppy. Life continued. I started dating again, carefully and slowly. Nothing serious, just reminding myself that I was still a person separate from being Emma's mother. I went on coffee dates, dinner dates, even had a brief relationship with a kind man named Marcus who worked in software. It didn't last. I wasn't ready for something serious, and he wanted more than I could give, but it reminded me that there was life beyond revenge and anger, and the past stopped my career, picked up in unexpected ways. The consulting work I'd been doing led to opportunities with startups and small companies that needed legal expertise but couldn't afford full-time counsel. I found I enjoyed the variety and the flexibility, and the work was lucrative enough that I was actually making more than I had at the big firm. I started feeling like myself again, or maybe like a new version of myself that had emerged from the ashes of who I used to be. On what would have been my 10th wedding anniversary, I did something symbolic. I took off my wedding ring, which I'd continued to wear on my right hand after the divorce, and I buried it in my backyard under a rose bush I planted. It felt melodramatic even as I was doing it, but it also felt necessary. A ritual marking the end of something and the beginning of something else. My mother came over that evening and found me in the backyard, dirt under my fingernails, crying quietly. She sat down next to me and put her arm around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you," she said. "For what? Destroying my marriage? Ruining my sister's life? Being a cautionary tale? For surviving," she said firmly. "For taking something that should have destroyed you and finding a way to live through it. For being a good mother to Emma despite everything. For not letting bitterness consume you entirely, even though God knows you had reason to be bitter. I spent a year planning revenge, I reminded her. I systematically destroyed two people's lives. That's not something to be proud of, isn't it? She asked. They hurt you in the worst way possible, and you refused to be a victim. You fought back. Maybe you fought dirty, but they'd already broken all the rules. I'm not saying revenge is healthy or good, but I understand why you did it. And more importantly, you didn't let it define the rest of your life. You did your revenge, you burned it all down, and then you started rebuilding. That takes strength. I thought about her words for a long time after she left. Was revenge ever justified? Had what I done been right, or just understandable? I still don't know the answer. What I did to Daniel and Claire was calculated and brutal. I used every resource I had: legal expertise, financial resources, social connections to tear apart their lives with surgical precision. I took satisfaction in their suffering. I wanted them to hurt the way they hurt me, and I made sure they did, but I also protected myself and my daughter. I ensured we had financial security. I prevented Daniel from controlling the narrative or painting me as the villain. I held him accountable for his choices in a way that our society rarely holds men accountable for infidelity. And yes, I punished Claire for a betrayal that went beyond simple affair. She'd violated the fundamental bonds of sisterhood. Family. Trust. Dr. Williams once asked me if I'd do it all again. Knowing what I know now about the emotional cost, it's the same question that young engineer asked me in my previous story, and my answer is complicated. I don't know, I told Dr. Williams honestly. Part of me thinks I should have just left quietly, filed for divorce without the public destruction, let them live their lives while I live mine. That would have been the mature, emotionally healthy response. But another part of me thinks that what I did was necessary, not just for practical reasons, but because I needed to act, to take control, to refuse to be passive in the face of betrayal. The revenge gave me agency when I felt powerless. It gave me a sense of justice when the situation felt cosmically unfair. And now? Dr. Williams prompted. Now that you have some distance from it? Now I think revenge is like chemotherapy, I said slowly, working through the metaphor. It's poison that you take into your body to kill a cancer. It works in that the cancer dies, but it also damages you in the process, kills healthy cells along with the sick ones. You do it because you have to, because the alternative is worse, but you wouldn't choose it if you had better options. And after it's over, you need time to recover from the treatment itself. Dr. Williams smiled. That's a very mature perspective. You're healing, Rebecca. Really healing, not just surviving. Emma turned 4, then 5. She started kindergarten, made friends, became her own person. She'd ask about Aunt Claire occasionally, why she never saw her, and I'd give vague answers about Aunt Claire living far away. When she's older, I'll tell her the truth, age appropriately. But for now, she doesn't need to carry the weight of adult betrayals. Daniel remarried when Emma was 6. Her name was Jenna. She was a teacher, and she seemed genuinely kind. I was prepared to hate her, but when I met her at a school event, she was warm and respectful and clearly loved Emma. I gave my blessing for Emma to spend time with her. And gradually, Jenna became part of our complicated family structure. It was strange, watching Daniel build a new life. He seemed genuinely changed, more present, more mature. Whether that change was real or just what he wanted me to see, I couldn't say. But Emma came back from visits to his house happy, talking about things they'd done, and that was what mattered. I asked Emma once, when she was 7, if she was sad that Mommy and Daddy weren't married. She thought about it seriously, the way she thought about all questions. Sometimes, she said, but Daddy has Jenna, and you have us, and that's okay. Some kids at school have 2 houses, too, out of the mouths of babes. She'd adapted to the reality of her family structure with remarkable resilience. in a way that made me think maybe I'd done something right despite everything. On Emma's 8th birthday, something unexpected happened. I received a letter forwarded through my lawyer from Claire. She'd apparently found out where I lived and had sent it through legal channels to avoid violating the restraining order. The restraining order had actually expired 2 years earlier, but Claire didn't know that. Or was being cautious. I held the letter for a week before opening it, debating whether I wanted to know what she had to say. Finally, curiosity won. The letter was 12 pages long, handwritten on lined paper, and it was an apology. Not a justification or an excuse, but a genuine, abject apology. Rebecca, it began. I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything from you because I lost the right to expect anything the day I betrayed you. But I need to say these things, even if you throw this letter away without reading it. I am so sorry for what I did to you. There's no explanation that makes it okay, but I want you to understand that it came from a place of jealousy and inadequacy that had nothing to do with you. You were always the successful one, the smart one, the one who did everything right. You got the good grades, the prestigious job, the perfect husband, the beautiful house. And I was the fuck up, the one who couldn't hold down a job or a relationship, the one who was always screwing up and disappointing everyone. When Daniel showed interest in me, it felt like finally I had something you didn't have. It felt like proof that I was worth something, that I could compete with you, that I wasn't just the inferior younger sister. I knew it was wrong. God, I knew it was wrong every single time we were together. But I couldn't stop because I was addicted to feeling special, feeling chosen, feeling like I'd won something. I didn't think about you. I didn't let myself think about you, about how much I was hurting you, about what would happen when you found out. I just lived in this fantasy where somehow this was okay, where somehow I deserved this happiness, even though it was built on destroying yours. The day you exposed everything, the day I lost my job and my family and my reputation, I wanted to die. Literally, I had pills in my hand and I was going to take all of them. The only thing that stopped me was knowing that even suicide would be making it about me, would be one more way of hurting you and mom and dad. So I lived. But barely. I moved to Florida and tried to become someone else. I changed my name to Anne, my middle name, and I pretended to be a person with no history, no family, no past. I worked shit jobs and lived in a shit apartment and drank too much and hated myself every single day. I deserved all of it. I deserved worse. But eventually, I got help. I started therapy. I joined support groups. I worked on understanding why I did what I did, what was broken in me that made me capable of that kind of betrayal. And slowly, very slowly, I started to become someone who could live with herself. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable. I'm not asking to see you or Emma or be part of your lives. I know I gave up that right. I'm just asking you to know that I'm sorry, that I regret every single thing I did, that if I could undo it, I would, and that you deserve better. You deserved a sister who loved you and protected you, not one who stabbed you in the back in the worst way possible. I hope you're happy, Rebecca. I hope Emma is healthy and thriving. I hope you found peace and love and everything you deserve. I hope my betrayal hasn't destroyed your ability to trust people, to build relationships, to live the full life you should have. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll be sorry for the rest of my life, and it still won't be enough. Your sister, though I know I lost the right to call myself that, and I read the letter 3 times, crying by the end of it. Not because it changed anything, it didn't, but because it was so human, so raw, so genuinely remorseful. This wasn't the Claire I'd known, the charming manipulator who could talk her way out of anything. This was someone who'd been broken and was trying to rebuild herself, just like I was. I didn't respond to the letter. I couldn't. The wounds were too deep, the betrayal too fundamental. But I didn't throw it away either. I kept it in a box in my closet, proof that Claire had become capable of genuine remorse. Even if that remorse couldn't bridge the gap between us. I told Dr. Williams about the letter in our next session. How do you feel? She asked. Sad, I said. Just sad. Not angry anymore, not vindictive, just sad. Sad for both of us, for what we lost, for what we'll never have again. Do you think you'll ever reconnect with her? Dr. Williams asked. I thought about it for a long time. I don't know. Maybe someday when Emma's older and asks about her aunt. Maybe when enough time has passed that I can be in the same room with her without feeling like I'm being stabbed. But not now. Maybe not ever. Some betrayals change the fundamental structure of a relationship so completely that there's no going back, even with genuine remorse and forgiveness. That's okay, Dr. Williams said gently. You're allowed to maintain that boundary. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can accept her apology in your heart without letting her back into your life. And that's where I am now, as I write this almost a decade after that baby shower. Emma is 10 years old, thriving in school, blissfully unaware of the details of how her family came to be structured the way it is. Daniel is remarried and seems genuinely reformed, though I'll never fully trust him. Claire is someone I used to know, living her own life somewhere far away, carrying her own regrets, and me. I'm not the woman I was before the betrayal. That woman died the day I opened that bedroom door. But I'm also not the cold, calculating destroyer I became in the months after. I'm something in between, something new, something that emerged from betrayal and revenge and healing. I've learned that revenge is complex. It's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's a tool that people use when they feel powerless, a way of reasserting control in situations where they've been victimized. Sometimes it's proportional and justified. Sometimes it goes too far. Usually, like in my case, it's somewhere in between. What I did to Daniel and Claire was brutal. I used every advantage I had to destroy their lives systematically. I took satisfaction in their pain. I wanted them to suffer, and I made sure they did. Looking back, I can see that some of what I did was necessary to protect myself and Emma, the divorce, the custody arrangement, the financial settlement. But some of it was pure vengeance, the public exposure, the career destruction, the way I turned their families and social circles against them. Do I regret it? That's a complicated question. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that human beings are capable of the kind of betrayal that makes revenge feel justified. I regret that I had to become someone capable of calculated cruelty to protect myself. I regret that Emma will grow up in a broken family because of other people's choices and my response to them. But do I regret the specific actions I took? I honestly don't know. They served a purpose. They protected me and Emma financially and legally. They ensured that Daniel and Claire faced consequences for their choices in a world that often lets people like them off easy. They gave me agency and power in a situation where I felt powerless. The cost, though, was high. Higher than I anticipated when I started down that path. The cost was my relationship with my sister forever. The cost was years of my life consumed by anger and planning and destruction. The cost was a part of my humanity, a certain softness and trust that I'll never fully get back. The cost was becoming someone I barely recognized, someone harder and colder and more capable of cruelty than I ever wanted to be. Was it worth it? On my good days, I think yes. I protected myself and my daughter. I refused to be a victim. I fought back against people who hurt me, and I won. On my bad days, I think no. I could have left quietly, processed my anger in healthier ways, moved on without scorched earth behind me. Maybe I'd be happier now if I had. Maybe I'd be able to trust people more, to be softer, to be the person I was before. But then I think about that moment, standing in the doorway, watching my husband with my sister, 7 months pregnant, at my own baby shower. And I think about how powerless and betrayed and violated I felt in that moment. And I think about the woman I became in response to that moment. The woman who refused to be passive or accepting or gracious about betrayal. And I think that maybe, just maybe, that woman did exactly what she needed to do to survive. Not perfectly, not beautifully, not in a way that will win any awards for emotional maturity or grace under pressure. But she survived. She protected her child. She built a new life from the ashes of the old one. And maybe that's enough. Emma asks me sometimes why I seem sad on certain days, why I stare out the window with that distant look in my eyes. I tell her I'm just thinking, just remembering. When she's older, I'll tell her the whole story, age appropriately. I'll tell her about the betrayal, about the revenge, about the cost of both. I'll tell her that people are complicated, that hurt people, that sometimes the people who love disappoint us in ways we never imagined possible. But I'll also tell her that we survive. We adapt. We become new versions of ourselves. We find ways to live with what we can't change and to change what we can't accept. We protect the people we love, even at cost to ourselves. We draw boundaries and enforce consequences and refuse to be victims. And sometimes, when necessary, we burn it all down and build something new from the ashes. That's the story of how I caught my husband with my sister at my own baby shower, and how my revenge destroyed them both. It's not a happy story. It's not a redemptive story. It's just a true story about betrayal and consequences and the complicated, messy reality of what revenge actually looks like when you move past fantasies and into action. I destroyed them, yes. But in the process, I also destroyed parts of myself. We all lost things we can never get back. And now we're all just trying to live with the aftermath, to build lives that make sense given the wreckage we've created and survived. Daniel is trying to be a better man, a better father. Whether he succeeds is up to him and Jenna and the life they're building together. Claire is trying to become someone who can live with what she did, someone who can carry that guilt and still find reasons to keep existing. Whether she succeeds is up to her and her therapist, and whatever grace she can find for herself and me. I'm trying to be more than the sum of my worst moments, more than the betrayed wife, more than the vengeful destroyer, more than the victim or the villain. I'm trying to be Emma's mother, a good one, who teaches her both strength and kindness. I'm trying to be the kind of person who can acknowledge that revenge is sometimes necessary without letting it become who I am. Some days I succeed. Some days I fail. Most days I'm somewhere in between, doing my best with the hand I was dealt and the choices I made in response. And that, I think, is the most honest ending to this story I can give. Not triumph, not despair, just the ongoing, complicated work of being human in a world where people hurt each other and we all have to find ways to live with that hurt. The baby shower was 10 years ago, but in some ways I'm still in that doorway, still making the choice between screaming or staying silent, still deciding who I want to be in response to betrayal. The difference is that now I know there's no perfect choice. There's just the choice you make, and then the choice to live with the consequences, and then the choice to keep moving forward anyway. I chose revenge. They chose betrayal. We all chose destruction over grace, punishment over forgiveness, justice over mercy. And now we're all living in the world those choices created, trying to find moments of peace and purpose amid the wreckage. That's the truth about revenge. It doesn't set you free. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't make you whole again. But sometimes when you've been shattered, When you've been betrayed in ways that fundamental, it's the only way you know how to pick up the pieces and put yourself back together. Even if the new version of yourself is sharper and harder and more dangerous than the original, I wouldn't recommend the path I took. But I also wouldn't take it back. It's made me who I am, for better and worse, and I have to live with that doubt we all do.